torpedo spotted!
Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. This, despite the slightly misleading background and the first impression, if you were to look at the gun layout, is not in fact a Japanese ship. This would be Her Majesty's ship Hampshire, and is a British premium. So what is that then all about? What is with that turret over there? Well, turns out that this was in fact an existing design. This was the 1927 design proposal for the Surrey class. And they in fact had the idea to stick another turret on and make a 5-turret 10-gun heavy cruiser. And that did not work out because of problems. First of all, the B turret, or not the B turret, the C turret was either going to be in front where it is here, where it was going to have some problems with endangering the superstructure, or it was going to be in the middle where the firing arcs would have been completely terrible. So in the end, the Admiralty decided that, you know what, no, we're just going to repeat the existing models with a bit better armor protection and call it a day, rather than experimenting with this very Japanese-looking layout to stick another turret on it. But I'm always glad to see that at least the paper ships have some trail in history, rather being completely made up. So there's that. And as you can see on the forward superstructure, this is a distinctly British heavy cruiser. So what is the ship all about then? Well, it's a premium, it's tier 8. And I believe it's out. I've seen a couple out and about already. I've just forgotten to review it when it actually came out. Let's compare her to, well, let's start out with the actual British tier 8 heavy cruiser, the Albemarle. Now, the British heavy cruiser are not particularly well liked. There are some people who absolutely swear by them, and they're not completely terrible ships, but they're nowhere near outstanding either. The main problem is the relatively sluggish reload on the heavy guns, and the relative absence of torpedoes. The ships are relatively large and not nearly as well armored as one would want. In return, they do get the smoke screens that we also see on the light cruisers and the other kind of gimmicks that you have. Plus, they do get an extra heel to sort of make up for the absence of armor and the relatively large and poorly maneuverable ships. The Albemarle gets 3 defensive AA2 and 2 smokescreens. The Hampshire does not get a smokescreen. She also doesn't get the extra heel. In return, she gets a sonar and a scout plane. Okay, let's compare then. The Hampshire, for some reason, gets significantly less hit points than the Albemarle. I mean, that's 3,000 hit points. That's 10%. Other than that, the armor, or relative lack thereof, is about the same. She's also slower than the Albemarle, albeit a little bit more maneuverable. And the guns, obviously, she gets pretty much similar guns, but in twin turrets instead of getting the triples on the Albemarle, we get 5 twin turrets in a Miyoko Takao sort of layout. They do have a very good range, a base range of 12 kilometers, but they can only fire armor piercing. And the armor piercing is actually somewhat less effective than on the Albemarle. Now, with a 2-second faster base reload and an extra gun barrel, because we get 10 all in all compared to the 9 on the Albemarle, you'd say, okay, that probably makes somewhat up for it. The torpedoes are completely identical. You get 2 quad launchers, 1 on each side. They're single fire capable and have a 7.8 kilometer range and a relatively fast reload. They're nothing special, but it's nice to have. In terms of AA, she does get a bit more on the small caliber, but overall it's probably about similar-ish. You can kind of be a bit of a support cruiser, but this is tier 8, and if you're facing things like Indomitables, which has nigh indestructible dive bombers, then if you're on your own, it'll get difficult. But if you are playing support cruiser, which this ship is actually not terrible at, then you can do that. The concealment is slightly better than on the Albemarle. So how does she then compare to the Takao? Because obviously if I wanted to have a 5-turret twin-gun ship at tier 8, that would be my, my reference point. Obviously the Takao only get the precise aim, but even the Takao is better armored and has more hit points than this thing. The Takao is also noticeably quicker and more maneuverable than the Hampshire. Obviously the Takao has the same 11-second base reload and doesn't get the 9-second reload, plus a shorter range, but the Takao does get to fire high explosive, and the high explosive is pretty good on the Takao. Also, the armor piercing, at least on paper, has a higher alpha damage. That said, Takao is firing Japanese cruiser armor piercing, which is not great, and in general is better at actually hitting destroyers. It's almost more comparable to the Italian semi-armor piercing in that regard. Against everything else, except you have a light cruiser at point-blank range, usually not worth using the armor piercing, given that the Japanese high explosive is very good. And obviously, the Takao's torpedoes are noticeably better than what the Hampshire has, simply on account of having more of them, doing more damage, and having better range. The AA is relatively dreadful on the Takao, but then no one's been accusing the Takao of being a support cruiser. This is a stealth assault cruiser with a relatively good concealment. So that's kind of the saving grace on the Hampshire here. So what is this thing then? Well, that's where it kind of gets interesting. So if we're looking at the setup of the ship, what is the idea behind this ship? Well, she's a ranged ship, definitely, because she does not get the smoke screen, but she does get the scout planes, which can increase our gun range by 12%, which isn't massive, but it gives us an extra kilometer, and it allows us to fire from range. That said, the gun layout means that in order to get all our guns on target, we do have to, be quite angled. Otherwise, even the sea turret isn't going to hit anything, and we only have 4 guns pointing forward compared to the 6 on something like an Albemarle. It's the same problem that the Takao is facing. That said, the Takao is all about positioning, setting fires, and spamming things with torpedoes. That's not something the Hampshire can do, on account of not being able to fire high explosive shells. She suffers from the same issue that you have on many of the British premium heavy cruisers, that they have the same kind of gimmick as the light cruisers, in that they can't fire high explosive, they only fire armor piercing. And the problem here is that the armor piercing is not that great compared to what you can output on, say, an Edinburgh, which has more guns and can do a quite significant amount of damage with those guns as well. So long range, no smoke screens, torpedoes more like an afterthought, and defensive AA sonar to me says more like stay with your team, support cruiser kind of thing. The big problem that you have at this point is that she's kind of a little bit similar to another ship in another tier 8 premium cruiser, the Tiger 59. The Tiger 59, at least, has a ridiculous amount of utility. She gets... This thing basically, on its own, isn't particularly useful, but if you pair it with something, it becomes extremely useful with this set of consumables. The problem is the Hampshire doesn't get that. But the Hampshire's guns also don't do an awful lot. I mean, they're not terrible, but given that you can't set any fires with them, and the dispersion can be a little bit questionable, it can be quite difficult to figure out what actually to do with this ship. Anyway, let's go through the setup. You do get, let's start from the top. You do get the choice between main battery traverse, which, given that the main battery traverse is pretty terrible, would be an option. Or you get a little bit less main battery traverse, but in return you get a bit more AA damage and a couple more hit points, which, given that the hit point pool is about 10% lower than her peers at tier, and she doesn't get the smoke screen, it feels relatively warranted. So I've went that way. You do get the choice between two camouflages. The historical camo, which gives you hit points, range on the main battery, which is great, large caliber AA range, which, okay, I'll take it for a support cruiser role, and unfortunately torpedo damage reduction, which is absolutely useless. You could stick the kind of steampunkish looking camo on that, which does not look utterly dreadful, but I don't know what exactly that's supposed to be. There's some flapping wings on the front here, so this might be some form of cross thing with another. With some other franchise, I don't know. But the values are significantly better on this thing because you get hit points, range, dispersion, and traverse. So I would honestly say that's the better choice from the stats perspective, if you can put up with what that thing looks like. But we will be sailing with the historical camo for that reason. And setup-wise, I have actually put the main battery mode 3 in, because the dispersion can be quite a bit trollish, especially when you're in that sort of 45 degrees up angle view from the scout plane. And sometimes it can be a little difficult to actually know where you're aiming, and the dispersion is not the greatest. Plus, these guns tend to struggle a bit with actually penetrating anything. And at this range that you want to be firing at, because you don't have a smoke screen, especially when it comes to things like battleships, the lack of precision does hurt. I have actually built her for concealment, because the base concealment is very good, and that does help to either get yourself out of trouble or to be a relatively nasty surprise for destroyers. Here's the other problem. Generally, if you're in a destroyer and you're running into a British cruiser, even if it's a heavy cruiser, those guns, if really high explosive, can really hurt. Plus, obviously, they have smoke screens and torpedoes. This thing, while it does get sonar, which is of some help, does not get a smoke screen and only has armor-piercing shells. But while this is not a problem on the British light cruisers, because that's 150mm armor-piercing, which will not overpenetrate destroyers in most cases and is lethal, on a heavy cruiser at close ranges, so 5 kilometers and under, the armor-piercing is just going to overpenetrate. So you are not good at dealing with destroyers, because you can't fight them close range where you can get all the 10 guns on target, and you can't fight them at long range effectively because of the dispersion and because, destroyers move. So that somewhat severely limits the kind of usefulness of this ship. Now I have put Tovi on here, and I have opted to go with the full support AA setup here. The reason I'm putting Tovi on is because he's the only captain in the British line that has the APCS Plus. Also, he is one that is relatively easily achievable because he comes out of one of the collection books. So anything that does not have the choice, and I'll just like using Tovi. He's a very good general purpose commander for anything British that fires armor piercing, and most British things do. I have also chosen the Giant Hunter instead of the Horizontal Protection Expert because buffing something that isn't there doesn't really make much of a difference given the relatively poor armor plating on this thing. So you may have heard that from sort of the thoughts I've been sprinkling in throughout the review. The ship it doesn't quite know what it wants to be. it wants to be Japanese, but it doesn't have the setup for it because it can't long-range HE spam and it can't long-range torpedo spam. It wants to be a British support cruiser, but it also doesn't quite have the setup for it because it can't fight destroyers at close range, which the sonar would have been primarily useful for. It can sort of lend a little bit of a hand in terms of AA, and other than that, just, lend long-range gunfire, and is probably most effective dealing with enemy light cruisers if they're giving you broadside, or just, long-range AP spamming at things like battleships. But even with the APCS, it is not super effective. It's not terrible, but you're going to be struggling to do a massive amount of damage without getting close in and unloading and getting into knife fights with the ship, which is a supremely dangerous proposition because you don't have any smoke screens and you're in a relatively poorly armored but very big cruiser. So it's a little bit in German we say it's neither fish nor meat. It's in between and doesn't know what it wants to be. But let me show you two games, one with regular setup with normal camo, one with the historical with extra range, and Tovi with APCS Plus and premium consumables, because she also doesn't get the extra heal that you get on the other British heavy cruisers. So she does have to be careful with her hit points as well. She can't just go HP tank. In the first round, we find ourselves in domination on Haven, facing an Indomitable, a Rook, Collingwood, an Amalfi, a Tiger 59, like I mentioned earlier. A very special ship that has a very specific purpose, and that is to stick with the team and support it. A Cleveland and a single destroyer with the Sims. We do have an August von Pasewalk in our own team. And so the first round, I am mostly going to be trying and play support cruiser, which is sort of what I feel is the predominant role of this ship. I am spawning over at D cap, which means that given that the destroyer is over on the other flank, I am going to go for D, try to capture D, and then position myself around C cap, hoping that the two battleships with me here are going to be going for the tanking. So we do have two battleships. I am going to head over to D, and then we'll make ourselves useful. The concealment is good, which means you can come to a little bit of a surprise, although surprising destroyers is surprisingly dangerous for yourself. But you can see that if you're giving a little bit of an angle, you can get the 3 forward turrets on target comfortably if you're used to Japanese cruisers. And it looks like the Indomitable is going for the AVP, which is a very interesting choice, given that the Pasewalk is having a relatively decent AA. So I am not sure what the business is there with that attempt. There's a smoke screen over there. That's either the Tiger or the Sims, but who has been smoking up there. But we'll find out. Anyway, we're taking decap, and then I'll inch forward a little bit, and we'll try to figure out what's going on over there. Maybe I can poke my nose into C cap, make sure that we take that, because the rest of my team is hitting B on the other side, which is brave of them. And it appears that was the Tiger. I have no idea what he's doing over here. Why are you here? You have no firepower, and you are a light cruiser. So I'm not complaining, mind you, but that's a very, very dead Tiger 59. Now there comes the Collingwood and is firing at me, so I do have to be a little careful here. Because again, I do not have a smoke screen, which, what is that Tiger going for? He's going for our Takao, which is equally suicidal. So I'm just going to torpedo the Tiger and then back off and go defensive against the Collingwood, because Collingwood is looking at me funny, and he's now changing fire towards the friendly battleships. And yes, against light cruisers fully broadsiding at 5 kilometers, scoring citadels is absolutely possible with the armor piercing. So let's get our nose into C cap, because the battleships sure as heck are not going to do it, and then we'll take the Collingwood under fire. And this is where the problem begins, because in a regular British heavy cruiser, you could either be AP spamming this thing for going more or less angled broadside. Just put up your smoke screen and you'll be good to go. Right now, I have to be careful that I do not give broadside to the battleships around B cap. I do not give broadside to the Collingwood, and at the same time I need to get my guns on target. So I am taking unfortunate amounts of damage from the Collingwood, and if I'm going bow in, I only get 4 guns on target, which is kind of meager. So I do have to back off here a little bit, and we'll see if we can get around the island hitbox or over the island hitbox, but the Collingwood having his guns pointing forward, and yes, the island hitbox is larger than the actual island visually, as usual. Try and back off a little bit more and see if I can get the shells past. Nope, I cannot. They're hitting the air next to the island, which is unfortunately impenetrable by 203mm armor piercing shells. But there's a Sims over there, so given that our Poltava is now relatively bravely going forward, I am going to try and deflect said Sims, hello Mr. Sims, while at the same time trying to maintain a respectful distance, not because I'm British, but because my armor piercing will start over penetrating if I'm getting closer than, say, 5 kilometers. So let's get there. Got the sonar up, so to the Poltava should not have been surprised by all these torpedoes coming in. And I am doing what I can here in trying to shoot some planes down. But even with the defensive AA up, I mean, this is an Indomitable. You know, they don't do an awful. Your AA will not do an awful lot against them. I've still got the sonar running. I've just dropped some torpedoes in a general direction. These are single fire torpedoes. But Sims at this range, if he would stop wiggling, I would actually be able to hit him. That's just what I'm doing. I'm squatting the capture circle, trying to lend AA support, trying to hit the Sims at longer ranges, and generally just trying to support my team. There's also a Cleveland. And again, if the Sims comes my way, I actually do need to ensure that I am staying at distance, otherwise my guns will start over penetrating. But Sims isn't even looking at me. He is coming my way, so I'm going to sail away a little bit, not because I'm scared of Sims, but because I want to keep him above 5 kilometers. Unfortunately, he is smoking up, which means I will drop torpedoes in his general direction. I've landed a couple of good hits here, which were just at the edge of when the guns will start over penetrating, and still managed to get in there. And it looks like he's probably taken enough damage at this point. That's his AA opening up there. That he does not want to poke his nose out and drop some more torpedoes on our Poltava, which is literally my purpose in life here, making sure that Sims doesn't do anything to my battleships. And there I see. Oh, he sent his torpedoes towards me. That is ambitious of him. Can I get the Rook from over here? Let's see if I can actually lob that. Yes, I can get that over the island hitbox. Unfortunately, the Rook is sailing towards the island. So, okay, Sims is trying to go the other way around. But he is spotted. So, our carrier is on the ball here. So I am going to go in the direction of where the Sims is and spoil his gameplay. Hello, Mr. Sims. You are well in range of my armor-piercing shells, and those hurt. We're getting a couple over penetrations, but generally if you hit the front or center of the destroyer, then okay. Poltava has taken him out, well done. And that just leaves the enemy carrier, so we're already done here. That means we can just lend a little bit more air support and see if we can shoot another plane down or so with the AA up and a defensive AA up and flying straight underneath the planes that are running both into a Parseval and into a Poltava and into myself. We are shooting those wings down. It's just the others. I'm just preparing them. And then the other two are cleaning them up, mostly the friendly carrier. So while we were trying to get into range and see if we can do anything else here, it kind of works as a support cruiser, but not as well as you wanted to. I would have been happier to have been in an Edinburgh, because faster rate of fire, more damage to the destroyers, smoke screens, which are extremely useful for British cruisers, and the same single-fire torpedoes, really. So, well, I mean, admittedly, I have 10 relatively rapid-firing 203mm guns, which is kind of nice. But let's see if I can still hit the Indomitable. No, I can't. But it's relatively rare that you can get to use them to their full potential. So if you're hitting light cruisers like that Tiger 59, who just YOLO'd in the middle and completely did not understand what the point of that thing is, then yes, absolutely, you can do a lot of damage that way. But in most other scenarios, it can actually be relatively difficult to do that. Still, I am generally happy to play support cruiser and ensure that the team wins. So if I could do my part, then I'm glad about it. Which brings us to the second round, in which I will have Tovi with APCS Plus, premium heals, and a historical camo. We are facing a Freddy, an Izumo, a Roma, a Magi, Harbin, Mogami, and a single Benham. Just one destroyer on the enemy team, and but obviously Mogami and Harbin are quite capable of putting some torpedoes in the water, so we do have to be a little bit careful about those. That said, I can take those on if I need to, and I have a relatively good concealment. So in an open domination map like this, I am reasonably confident that I can outspot probably the cruisers. I'm not sure what the concealment of the Mogami is and the Harbin. Might get close here. Harbin's probably relatively sneaky. But I should be able to spot them, or they should not be able to outspot me by an awful lot. Let me put it that way. And against those things, with 10 8-inch guns, I'm actually quite confident to take them on. Plus, I've got the sonar, so if anybody of these launches torpedoes, then that's not a massive problem. And Benham obviously is an issue if I can't see him. But again, I should be able to sneak up to the enemy capture circle without being spotted immediately and deleted by the enemy battleships. So there's that. We have spotted one of the enemy battleships, talking about which, and I probably would be able to get into range if I was to use the scout plane now. In fact, I probably would be. I definitely would be in gun range now. But I don't want to give my position away just yet and let the enemy team know that I'm heading towards decap, because I don't know where the rest of them is. There's the Harbin. There's the Freddy. So we've got the 3 battleships over there. We've got Harbin over, and I'm spotted. Okay, that's the Mogami. So we've pretty much spotted each other. So Mogami just got a little bit of a surprise, which is where the concealment build really shines. I'm not yet dropping torpedoes because I want to see what Mogami is up to. There's also a smoke screen over there. That might either be the Harbin or the Benham. No, that's not the Harbin. So that's the Benham. So there's going to be more torpedoes in the water here. But Mogami obviously very dangerous with torpedoes. And I'm just waiting. There come the Benham sea mines. I'm just waiting where Mogami is going to go. And then finish him off with the guns while simultaneously dodging the Benham sea mines. Oh, come on. Okay, one of my torpedoes is going to take him down. And I have taken a lot of damage actually from the Mogami's armor piercing, which, yes, because I might be a heavy cruiser, but that's heavy by name, not by nature. That refers to the armament, not to the armor. The armor is pretty crap. Benham. So we do want to, same story again, we do want to keep the Benham at arm's length to ensure full penetrations for our main guns. Unfortunately, my sonar is on cooldown. And I'm dropping that single. I forgot to fire all the torpedoes, so the launcher won't recharge. He is getting into a knife fight with the Benson. That sounds like a terrible idea, because the Benson is probably going to win that. And yes, I would say the Benson has won that. And that means scratch 1 Benham. Now, Roma. Roma is a different proposition altogether. So this is sort of where you'd see what the ship is supposed to feel like for long-range gunnery. So the idea, and I agree that this works, the idea is that you're sitting at long ranges, and I'm certainly not as at long range as I want to be, and unload armor piercing at potentially battleship weak spots. So I'm trying to hit the stern section there. And if you can manage that, you're doing relatively well in terms of damage. The problem obviously is now he's at 12 kilometers, but that's what I've got the scout plane for. So Harbin, Roma, Harbin. Let's finish off the Harbin. Nah, he's going behind an island. Scout plane up, and now we were going to try and hit the stern section of the Roma from the scout plane view, which is actually harder than it looks like. So this might just be lack of practice with the ship, but okay, Harbin's dead. Roma's gone undetected, which is unfortunately the case. There are some torpedo. Oh, there's Roma. Okay, let's try that again and see if I can manage to hit the stern section reliably from this range. And yeah, 4 out of 10 isn't bad. The problem is, well, it's 4 out of 10. So yes, you can do a decent amount of damage with the guns if you get to just sit somewhere and unload at the enemy team, and then you rack it up over time. So while we are chasing down the Roma. And I think at this point we can relatively confidently say that this match is won, because the only question that's remaining at this point is if we get a Rufflestomp medal or if someone's going to get themselves killed. Mind you, this is with the APCS Plus, and we're still at times struggling to get full penetrations here. The idea, the general idea behind the ship is sort of a hybrid between a Japanese assault cruiser that does long-range gunnery and a support cruiser that does, you know, help the team out in some way. And it's an interesting concept. And I wouldn't say it's a terrible ship, but honestly, I think it's kind of caught in between. It's neither as good as its colleagues at either of those roles. So it can do both roles, but at the same time, and we did get Ruffle Stomp. At the same time, it's not quite as good at it as either of them. So it's not quite as good as dishing out huge amounts of damage like you would be, say, on a Takao with permafires, massive amounts of torpedoes, and the huge Alpha Strike. It's not as good as a destroyer hunter or support cruiser as, say, the British light cruiser like the Edinburgh at this tier. And I mean, the British heavy, I would say it fits in from the kind of result you can expect with the British heavy cruisers. So let's put it that way. If you like the British heavy cruisers, then this is an interesting twist on the British heavy cruisers. Just be aware that you don't have any smoke screens and you have a relatively low hit point pool and no additional heal. It's a mediocre ship, I'd say, and probably for people who are into this sort of thing. For general purpose, I would say if you want an assault cruiser with lots of guns at tier 8, just get a Takao. It's a better ship at that. If you want to have a support cruiser at tier 8, a Cleveland or an Edinburgh is a great choice. If you really enjoy the British heavy cruisers and you think that you can do without the extra heal and without the smokescreen, and it's worth to have one more gun barrel and a 2-second faster base reload with no high explosive shells, then maybe this is a ship for you. And that's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.